Hey, Xers, and welcome back to Gen X Resistance. I am your host, Paul Stevens. And today's episode is going to be a little different. I'll be honest, I wasn't even sure how to really approach this issue. See, normally I don't dive into politics here, and it's not because I'm afraid to, I could care less, but it's because the show is about education, perspective, and connecting the dots between the last 51 years of lived experience and the generations that are coming up behind us. But after what happened yesterday involving Charlie Kirk, I felt the need to say something. And if I recorded this podcast yesterday, it would have been just pure venom. Because at first I was too angry, too heartbroken for his family, for his friends, for what was taken from them. A 30-year-old God-fearing man just gone. A husband and a father who is a husband and father himself, who will never see his kids grow up. All because some monster couldn't handle the fact that a young man with a microphone just dared to bring facts, engage in debate, and challenge ideas on a college campus. And what makes this even harder to process? Beyond the tragedy itself, what we really lost yesterday was more than just a man. It was a voice committed to the very thing that this country is supposed to stand for: open discourse. Like him or not, Charlie Kirk created space for opposing opinions. He did not shy away from tough conversations. He invited debate. And even when people came at him with insults, calling him a Nazi, a racist, or whatever, he did not match hate with hate. He didn't blow up or storm off stage. He stayed calm, he stayed respectful, and he showed that disagreement doesn't have to mean dehumanization. And I need to say this because it's been eating at me. It's been bothering me ever since the news broke. If you are one of the people out there who are cheering Charlie's death, celebrating that his voice has been silenced, then you are nothing more than a garbage human being, period. There is no moral high ground in celebrating the murder of someone simply because you did not like what they had to say. You do not have to agree with Charlie. You could have thought that he was wrong on every single issue he ever raised, and that is okay. That is debate. That is discourse. But to celebrate his death, that is not disagreement. That is not politics. That is the ugliest form of cowardice there is. And honestly, people like that probably shouldn't be allowed to procreate or pass on their twisted genes to the next generation. But I digress. And that brings us right to the heart of it. The First Amendment. The freedom of speech. It's not just some abstract principle tucked away in some dusty old document hanging on a wall somewhere. It is the foundation of what allows us to grow, to challenge ideas, to keep the whole experiment that we call America moving forward. And as someone who hosts a podcast, I believe in that freedom strongly and deeply. Look, I may not like what you have to say. I may disagree with every word and think it's trash, but I will always defend your right to say it. Because the moment that we start deciding which voices get heard and which don't, we are no longer a free society. We are just pretending to be one. And I think it hits me hard because we grew up in a different time. Look, I had friends from all walks of life. Some were better off financially. Some were struggling like me and my family. Let's just say I grew up pretty financially challenged. I had friends who went on to college while I didn't. And honestly, that never defined our intelligence or our worth. Charlie Kirk himself was an autodidact, self-taught, just like I was. Everything I know, I taught myself. And he had no problem holding his own against people with fancy degrees. But back then, differences didn't actually automatically divide us. We had friends with all kinds of political views, but we always managed to find common ground somewhere. We debated, we disagreed, but we still respected each other. And at the end of the night, we could grab a slice of pizza with each other, go watch a movie. And I think that is something that we are losing today, the ability to disagree without destroying each other. And maybe that's the bridge that we as Gen X can still offer the next generation. We weren't raised on cancel culture. We weren't trained by algorithms to only hear the voices that we agree with. We actually had to sit in the same room and listen to each other. We had to argue it out, and we had to still show up the next day as friends. That muscle, that ability to argue without hate, that's atrophying in our culture right now. And if we don't exercise it again, we are going to lose it entirely. So if you think about this, debate used to be a sign of respect. If I take time to argue with you, it means that I value your position enough to challenge it. It means I think you're capable of defending it. But what does that mean now? Too often, debate is seen as violence and disagreement as hate. And that's not just wrong, that's dangerous. Because when words no longer matter, violence fills that gap. When speech is suppressed, people start swinging fists or worse. And yesterday's tragedy is proof of that. Now, I want to pause and say this. Freedom of speech doesn't always mean freedom from consequences. It doesn't mean that every word spoken is wise or helpful. But it does mean that we have to allow space for words, even words we don't like, because that's the only way truth can ever rise to the top. We were raised in a world where individuality actually meant something. We didn't live through screens. If we had a disagreement with a friend, you hashed it out in the driveway or the basketball court or sitting on the hood of a car drinking a Coke. Nobody unfollowed anybody. Nobody erased you. And I think that's why moments like this are so important for us to speak into, because we've lived both sides. We know what it was like before speech got policed by mobs. And we could see where things are heading if we keep treating discourse as dangerous. Charlie Kirk embodied that old school value of open debate. He didn't always win over the room, but he always showed up with facts, with conviction, and with respect for the process. And for that, he paid the ultimate price. So what do we do with that? What do we, as Gen X, pass on to the next generation? I think it's this: the courage to disagree without hate, the willingness to listen without fear, and the strength to protect the rights of others even when we don't like how they use them. That's resistance. That's the fight worth having, because if we lose the freedom to speak openly, we lose the freedom to be ourselves. And if Gen X stands for anything, it's authenticity. It's showing up as who you are, not what somebody else says you should be. So here's my challenge. Don't silence people you disagree with. Don't run from uncomfortable conversations. Instead, lean into them. Ask questions, push back, listen hard. And then, when it's all said and done, shake hands, grab a cup of coffee, and remember that the person across from you is still a human being, not a label, not an enemy, and definitely not a target. Because if we can't do that, if we can't even hold a civil debate without fear of violence, then Charlie's death won't just be a tragedy, it will be a turning point, and not the kind we want. All right, so I know that this one was a little heavier than usual, but it matters. Because if we as Gen X don't remind the culture what open discourse looks like, who will? If you are the praying type, man, pray for his family, pray for this country. All right, thanks for listening. If you want to share your thoughts, you can email me at genxresistance@gmail.com. You can leave a message in the link in the show notes, or now on YouTube, you can leave a comment in YouTube. And if you found value in this episode, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. All right, until next time, stay strong, stay real, never stop resisting, and most importantly, stay rad, my friends.